So as most of you know, I am not someone who listens to the Native Land podcast. And a few years ago, when they first premiered their very first episode, I reviewed that episode and I talked about how, for me, I could only get through 3 episodes, and I had made the decision that it was not the podcast for me. And all of us are different, especially if you already pay attention to politics. For me, I just wanted something different than what I was already getting, and I didn't feel like their podcast for me would offer anything different in my political commentary consumption diet. And so because I'm old, getting older, I don't have time to waste, right? And so I just couldn't, it just wasn't going to be interesting for me. But one of the things I have to say is, in the wake of Andrew Gillum's arrest, and he was in court today, Thursday, August 13th, I have to say big ups to these people. I wanted to make an episode praising Bakari Sellers and Angela Rye, because this has put an enormous strain on them, and they have been constantly and consistently cranking out content. They have not fallen back at all. Matter of fact, they've ramped it up. A lot of you know they have recently added something called solo pods, right? And this is a direct response to Andrew Gillum's absence. You know, they were already doing mini pods, which they started, I think, at the end of 2024, but solo pods started directly after Andrew's arrest. And this is where Bakari or Angela will film a solo podcast episode from wherever they are in response to something that's breaking in the news right then and there. I think that's wonderful, because anytime there's a change in what you're doing in terms of a podcast or a TV show, it's very important to keep the content coming, okay, in whatever capacity the person has the ability to. And I just think, you know, that the support that they are showing to Andrew, the fact that they have made it very clear publicly that he has not been fired, he has not been suspended, none of those things happened, but the door is open for him to return at any time, and that it was his decision to take a sabbatical while he dealt with all of this. And of course, that was smart, because trying to be on the Native Land podcast while dealing with all, you know, the things that he's got going on would have done nothing but bring more negative press to the Native Land podcast. And Andrew Gillum, of course, was cognizant of that. So I just want to say, great job that they're doing. Now, I just went over there and took a gander and just tried to see, well, have they slowed down any? What's going on? Because I've seen some people on Instagram and Facebook saying, you know, maybe it's time for them to kind of wrap it up. I don't think, and this is just me, I don't think the fact that Andrew Gillum isn't there is a reason for them to cancel or to take their podcast off the air. I mean, that would speak to whether they have a strong team. I mean, and you know what? I'm just going to be frank. When I did listen to it initially during the time period when I was doing the review, I didn't see where Andrew Gillum added, you know, something that was just so important that without that they couldn't make it. You know what I'm saying? I would think that Bakari Sellers, being younger and being actually out there, you know, amongst people at his CNN gig and all the things he does, that he would have something more of value to add to the conversations than Andrew. But I don't think they should cancel. I don't think they should even consider that unless, you know, iHeartMedia has some issue with them only being down to 2 co-hosts, which I doubt they do. And so this is really, this happens a lot in life, right, y'all? Where there's a team and everyone on the team should be carrying their weight. And then something happens, and now the other team members have to not only carry their load, but the load of the individual who is, you know, having to take a break for whatever reason. And in a lot of ways it's unfair, but also it also is just something that actually kind of is a test, so to speak. And I think right now, even though Andrew Gillum is in the situation he's in because of his own personal choices, I do think also this is serving as some sort of a test also for the Native Land podcast. Can they keep going in the midst of something really trying, because they've been taking a beating in the media in regards to their PR, especially Angela Rye's. Remember, we talked about this in our community, her response when she and Bakari, did the official Native Land podcast response. And instead of being professional like Bakari was and all of that, Angela took the angry woman route, right? She lashed out, she cursed people out, she called them names, and he tried to help her by, trying to tone her down, but she wouldn't listen. And so in the wake of all of that, they have gotten negative press, not as much as they would be getting, like I said, if he were still trying to be a part of the podcast. But I think it's wonderful that they are continuing forward, guys, because despite anything, this is still, I think, for people who find the Native Land podcast valuable to them, meaning they feel like they become informed from listening to Angela and now just Bakari. I think that they should continue, if not for nothing else, for that demographic of people that are being helped or informed by their conversation. Now, there is some talk, right, that the solo pod edition is a testing of sorts of its own. That should they need to disband because of whatever reason, would it be possible that Angela or Bakari could carry it on his or her own? Or could they have their own individual podcast? That way, in the future, should something happen like this, everyone else doesn't have to try to hang on to the ship because of one person who was thrown off or who got off, because of their own decisions. I think that's possible. That's quite possible that this is not just the addition of Solo Pod is not just something that they're doing to say, hey, we want to start reacting on the spot to breaking news. Yeah, it probably is serving as to test to see how will people respond. How many numbers will Angela Rye get on her solo pod? How many numbers will Bakari get on his solo pod, right? I don't know, either way, for me, I think for the people that Angela Rye speaks to, for the people that Bakari Seller speaks to, I feel that their fan base will follow them, whether it's collectively as the Native Land Pod or individually, because the people who are listening obviously find that there's something valuable in terms, again, of information that they're getting from listening to them. So for me, I don't see nothing but a win-win. This can only be a win-win as long as they continue to provide content, right? In regards to Andrew, when we learned here, what was it, the last week or two, that Andrew didn't show up for his drug test, and then when his random drug test, and then when they tested him, he tested positive for meth. And by the way, for those of you who were wondering where the video footage is today, like I was, I thought since he had to be in court today that we would get to see him, because, he was back in jail after that. I think the press were very, courteous to Andrew. They, didn't show him. The judge allowed his attorneys and others to speak for him. He didn't have to get up and he didn't have to say anything, although the judge could be overheard saying he wanted to treat Andrew Gillum just like he treated all the other people. And we know his attorneys are lobbying for him to be a part of drug court, because if he successfully completes drug court, then the charges can be dismissed and off his record and all those things. I think the fact that Andrew Gillum has had that incident years ago I think even though he has, we thought, from the outside looking in, had moved on, the fact that he was caught in Alabama with all that stuff in his vehicle, and that made national news, so that's yet another embarrassing headline. And then for him to test positive for meth after that, I think it's safe to say that Andrew Gillum is truly in the depths of his addiction, to where humiliation is not changing it, shame, embarrassment of himself, his family, his children, none of that is even making a dent in his choices. He's still choosing to use. I think Andrew Gillum, y'all, needs to do one thing. I think he needs to be truthful to himself. I think he needs to own up to the fact that, he doesn't really want to be a married man. He wants to be a free man who is able to openly love another man. I believe personally, as I said before, one of the major roots of his issue is him not allowing himself to be open the way he needs to, right? Not being able to live your truth, I think, is a very damaging thing. It's very damaging. I know a lot of you have heard me share many, many years ago. I was talking with a client and they had a situation similar to his. And we were talking, and I was trying to convince this person, you need to get into therapy and let a therapist, because they came from a highly religious family. You need to get into therapy and let the therapist walk you through steps on how to come out to your family and all these things. And this person had all kinds of illnesses. I mean, it was one thing after the other. I mean, so much so to the point where people thought the person was faking. And I'll never forget saying to her, you got to make a decision. Do you want the sickness or the secret? Because the secret is obviously making you sick. Because the doctors keep telling you, according to what you're telling me, they can't find nothing wrong with you, right? And so I think those of us, who don't deal with these issues, we don't understand just how debilitating in so many ways and torturing it is for a person like Andrew, who's trying to live one way publicly when it's just not his truth. It's just not his truth. Y'all know I always go back to Caitlyn, Bruce Jenner. He had gotten in his 60s and he was like, I can't live like this no more. I'm coming out, right? I'm not going to do it, big, right? And so I think Andrew Gillum needs to find courage. I think he needs to be honest. Now, am I saying that if he were to, truly live out loud, that would solve all his addiction problems? Absolutely not, because addiction can become a habit too, and the body can get used to these chemicals. But I definitely think it would go a long way of giving him the power and the strength, the inner strength he needs to get the help he needs. Because from the outside looking in, it just doesn't seem like Andrew wants to be helped. And I don't know, he really needs to talk to someone. We had talked about before that Andrew had said, this was years ago during his Tamron Hall interview with his wife, that, he had done drug intervention before, and he had, gone to therapy. But here we are now, all these years later, and it appears that Andrew never really stopped what he was doing. Because he's spiraling so bad now that, again, even being in national headlines hasn't changed him. It hasn't been, a wake-up call for him. And, now we talked about how there's no point in, saying, I feel so sorry for his wife, because she's not a victim. Y'all remember we talked about that his wife is not a victim. I went through very succinctly what she told Tamron Hall and what Tamron Hall told the world, which is this lady told her that before they were even married, Andrew came out to her. And so we talked about she chose to continue the relationship. She chose to marry him, and not just have one, not 2, but 3 of his children. So she is not a victim. Andrew's not abusing her. And I was just cautioning people, stop calling this man names online, saying he's abusing this woman and that he probably, used her. No, she made a choice. She made a choice. Just like Andrew's making choices, his wife made choices. And so at the end of the day, what I think should happen, which I don't think people are talking about, is that Andrew just needs to resign from the Native Land podcast so that they can be free from the negative press of whatever's going to happen with him in the future. I know they love him. He's their brother. They say they're all friends. And so I think if for nothing else, he owes them that. Where, I'm not going to try to drag you guys down with whatever it's going to be happening with me, right? And so as far as I'm concerned, I think, as I said, the Native Land podcast should continue. I think they're doing a good job consistently putting out their content and increasing it with the addition of solo pods. Yeah. So for those of you who are, listeners of their podcast and viewers of it, because they also have it up on their YouTube channel, what are your thoughts? Are you like the people on Instagram? Are you split down the middle? Do you feel like that this is a time for them to take a breather? Or do you feel that, listen, one monkey don't stop no show. Y'all know that song, right? Keep on rolling. This train gonna get, now of course all the lyrics don't fit with what's going on with oh boy, but you get the point I'm making here, is that do you think one person should stop a show? I don't know. That's not my attitude. My attitude is if the person or the people have the ability to continue on, which they obviously do, right, that's what they should do, right? Andrew knew he had problems before he joined the podcast, okay? And so I don't see why his problem should become a Native Land podcast problem to where they need to slow down or take their podcast off the air, just kind of in solidarity with him. They've already come out and said they support him. I feel like that's enough in terms of anything else. They need to just keep moving forward. They don't need to keep addressing Andrew. They don't need to say anything else. They've said it. We've all responded to it, and they just need to continue forward. So I personally think they're doing a good job, because I think it's difficult for them right now. It's very difficult for all of them. Now, lastly, before I let you go, I want to talk about something else I saw someone say on Facebook. They felt like maybe Tiffany Cross should come back and kind of sit in Andrew's stead. For those of you who don't know, Tiffany left at the end of last year, in December of last year. And according to her, because they did a goodbye episode with her, she wasn't fired or anything like that. It was her decision because she really wanted to focus, she said, on outside projects, okay? Now, other than her latest book she has out, she may have other things in the works. She has a Substack also, for those of you who would like to follow her on Substack, and it's just her name, Tiffany Cross. My thoughts on that is this. Would it be great for Tiffany to come back and sit in until they either find a third co-host to replace Andrew? I think that would be nice, but I don't think they have to have a third co-host. I think, because they started with 3, does that mean they have to continue with 3? As far as I'm concerned, from what I was seeing in my research before I came on, Andrew and Angela are Bakari and Angela are doing a great job. So I don't know. I don't know if Tiffany needs to come to help out. I don't see that they need help in the way that people are suggesting. Because Angela and Bakari, their commentary is still rocking and rolling for their audience. I saw it in the comments. Their audience is engaging with them. They are agreeing and disagreeing with them. No one's saying, y'all need somebody else to kind of even out the commentary. No, I think a lot of times people, they want it to be the way they saw it in the beginning or the way it was, right? 3 people. And so now it seems a little off to them. But no, as far as I could see, they are both doing a good job. They are talking about the trending political topics. They're offering up commentary that their audience likes. And I feel like as long as the audience is continuing to support them with just the 2 of them and the addition of solo pods, I think that's great. By the way, their numbers have not declined. So that is a good thing. I'm sure iHeartMedia is happy for that. And their company, Angela, Chris Morrow, and Charlemagne's company, Reason Choice Media, who is the founding, of course, of Native Land, they're all happy about that. So, Andrew's absence hasn't affected the numbers. And I think when it comes down to it, that's what's going to be the deciding factor. If ever the numbers start, kind of dwindling, then they may revamp and say, Tiffany, come help us out until he gets here, or let's try to audition a 3rd host. But sometimes I feel like these people feel like they need extra people. Like when Angela Yee left the Breakfast Club. Did they actually have to have another co-host, or could they have just gone on the way they were? Well, the audience was used to hearing a female voice in the midst of the guys. And so, and that was their kind of format and their formula. So they took their time and found someone. But sometimes that cannot work out. So as far as I'm concerned, the numbers haven't changed. And so I think that they're doing just fine the way that it is. But again, I'm not a listener of theirs. So for those of you who are, drop down there in the comments and let all of us know your thoughts on it, okay? And I'll talk to you on the next episode. Bye, guys.